Hello there. Good morning, if it's morning where you're watching this, and thanks for joining. So every month we host special guest interviews here in the Being Tea space, ranging from folks who are tea buyers and blenders, people who grow tea, people who are bloggers, enthusiasts, all in the spirit of creating community and helping to introduce good tea people to each other. Because as big as this world is, the tea world is a small part of that, and so we can all be cozier and closer together. So this month we have a new guest interview. Before we get started, though, just a little bit of background for some of you who might be new, and maybe I haven't met you before, we haven't interacted before in this space. So my name is Suze. And I'm a tea educator here in the US. I've been teaching tea for about 16 years, mostly in professional and company settings, but also increasingly in festival spaces, consumer programs, things like that. Being Tea is my small company focused on tea education. And here online, we teach different tea classes every single month for subscribers. So subscribers can sign up here at patreon.com/beingtea. So the support of our members each month helps to create the possibility for tea interviews like this and special events that I'm able to do around the country. So if you're interested, check out patreon.com/beingtea. You can also email me at any time at hello@beingtea.com. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, or if you also might know of some other folks that you would like to see interviewed on this program, I would be very happy for that. I love meeting new tea folks. So our guest this morning is actually somebody who I have been following for quite some time on Instagram. I know that sounds like a very sort of odd and very simplistic way of introduction, but I discovered her teas and her farm through Instagram, through seeing kind of some similar, people you might know might follow this person. And something that just struck me right away was just the sheer beauty of the land that she lives on, where she's growing tea, the wildlife, the insects, just everything in the area is so beautiful, so amazing. Is a long dream of mine to go and visit. So I'm going to invite her up on screen right now to be able to share her story. And we'll connect in just a second here. And this is actually an extra special treat for those of you who didn't know, perhaps some of the corners of the world where tea might grow outside of the main areas that we tend to think of, like China and Japan and India and Sri Lanka. Our guest today is all the way from Scotland, one of the furthest north places that tea can be grown. Tea also grows here in the United States too. So another little fact that often folks are really surprised about to learn. Tea grows in many different types of environments. It's not a tropical plant that has to grow in a specific area, near the equator or anything like that. It can grow in a very wide range of areas. And so the tea that grows in Scotland, I found to be quite different than some of the teas in other places. So we're going to learn a little bit more about that today. And also some of the practices that Monica, our guest, shares with how she grows tea, such as organic farming, natural farming, and really aligning some of her values with some of her peers in industry who also focus on this area. Let me just check and make sure. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Yeah, you made it.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I can, Suze. Hi, Suze. And I got these. Because last time you said maybe I should get some, although you look much better with your lovely red ones.
I know. I like them because they pop. They're very colorful.
Thank you so much for the introduction. It was lovely to hear what I was able to hear. And then
while you were getting set up,
temporarily chucked me off. But hopefully it's fine now. Hopefully it will remain fine for this hour.
Nice. Thank you so much for joining. I made a little pot of some cozy tea here. I didn't have enough left over of the tea that you sent because I drank it very quickly. I wasn't rationing. But I made like a nice little cozy morning tea that I thought would be good for the occasion.
Lovely. I'm having a bit of Longjing actually, just teasing out the last bit of beauty from it.
Nice, nice. So get started here. So where in Scotland is Windy Hollow located? Can you tell us a little bit about where you're at and how long you've been there?
Okay. We are actually, when you look at the map, more or less in the middle of Scotland.
Okay.
So Perthshire is quite central in Scotland. And when you look at the map and you see Glasgow and Edinburgh, although for you, of course, it's the other way around. Glasgow and Edinburgh.
Yeah.
I have to think of from your perspective now, but Glasgow and Edinburgh. And then you go in a triangle about an hour north of that in the middle. That's where we are, in the middle of beautiful Perthshire. If you like to talk about longitude and latitude, then I think we're on the 56th latitude, roughly, which is actually quite north.
Yes.
To try and attempt to grow tea. So a big challenge.
Big challenge, big challenge. So how long have you been growing tea there?
How long? I actually, because I thought you're going to ask me that. And I thought, gosh, I'm going to look up in the air not knowing how long it's been because the years just passed by in a wonderful way. But I would say probably some early experiments didn't work, but probably we have now tea plants in year 4, year 3, year 2, year 1.
Nice.
Which is actually really nice because I can really compare the growth. I do grow from seed, all of them from seed. And the seed is planted after the frost. So in Scotland or where we are, we can still have frost right until the end of April. And so May time, the first couple of weeks in May, I would plant the tea seeds, and then it takes about 6 weeks for the babies to appear, and that's the only time now that they're actually inside. So since we've started, or since I've decided to go fully natural farming, which if you want to know more about that I can explain a little bit later. They will only be more sheltered in that during that first winter, inside in an inside space. But after that, they all go out, and because it's a perennial, of course, they're then planted in their final place. So we look for a home, and it's quite special to plant it then because it will never move again. And when I'm dead, and you're dead, and all of us are dead, they're still hopefully, happily growing there and thinking of us, Suze.
Yes.
Maybe. And here I shouldn't move very much because that stuff and the things in my ear. But these are, for example, these are baby ones from this year. So you can see even in winter, they actually have a beautiful dark green color.
They do. They're shiny.
And of course, yeah, they're lovely. Yes. Even though now and the indoor space is not heated, so they are not I don't pretend that there's no dormancy for them.
Sure.
So they do get pretty cold still in the winter, but just a little bit more sheltered compared to the outdoor plants. But lovely dark green. And if you ever want to plant tea, yourself or some of the listeners want to plant tea, then that's a good sign. If you want to plant organically and you do get a good color, they tell you that they actually get from the soil what they need, if they have a lovely dark green color.
What else do you grow on your farm?
Oh, did I actually answer your question?
Oh no, yeah, you did. I was wondering, so tea, was that the first thing that you were growing, or is that something that you added to other things that you already had on the farm?
It's a good question, actually, because I first, years ago, which seems now in another life, but I used to work as a psychologist. I did my degree and everything and started to work as a psychologist with people who have eating disorders and anxiety and depression. And and then we had an opportunity, gosh, probably about 8 to 10 years ago, to buy a lovely piece of land, 24 acres of land in Perthshire, this beautiful space. And we took that opportunity. But I primarily was always interested in biodiversity and nature, and was quite early on in my life actually interested in climate change. I read what was it called? Al Gore's, when that first came out. I don't know if you know Al Gore's book. What was that called again? Anyway, so quite early on. So that came first for me, the love of plants and animals and how they all share one space, I guess, in a healthy way. And then I was introduced to the idea of planting tea, and the more I learned about it, the more I thought it's such a special plant. It is a beautiful plant visually, because it's shiny and it's dark green and it produces these beautiful, big seeds and white flowers, and it's very dreamy and beautiful. And so it gives you that a lot of pleasure in that way. But it also has so much history, and you can also make tea, and you can make from that one plant so many different types of tea.
It's a very useful plant
in so many different ways. So it's a fascinating plant, and I've become to I really love it and care for it, and just in the last few years since I've been growing Camellia sinensis, I've just really also tried to understand it, what it needs. And because for me, I think I used to see it as a triangle, it's a square for me, but with 4 points. So I've got to be good at growing tea. I've got to be good at developing my own palate. I don't think you can be a good tea maker if you don't have a decent palate. And then you have to be good at processing tea. And the fourth element, I think, is a sense of learning about the culture that is there, so rich in many different countries, not just in China and Japan, but in Taiwan, and in also this a little bit hidden and less well-known beautiful tea culture in Korea that I've experienced was lovely, very lovely too. So it's got so much to it, really.
Yeah, I think tea has a really wonderful way of giving back in such a really noticeable way that I think it's really hard to be involved with tea and not feel that pull to want to get more involved with the world around you and with nature, and to care more about your environment and your land. I mean, so many of us, we don't have the opportunity to grow any of our own food, any portion of our own food. Maybe we might have a small herb garden, but we don't grow any of our own food. And so we don't see on a daily basis that magic that happens when you put something in the earth, and the earth loves you enough and cares and gives back, and you get free food, and with tea, when you're really involved with tea and you care for it, you see some of that magic, and it starts to seep in how you might care about other things around you just as much.
Yes, I agree, Suze, totally. And even if I just show you this, they turn into their own little people, because look, when you grow from seed, I mean, look what happens. I don't know if you can see how different these guys are.
Yeah.
And these are all from 4 different plants, but I've got many more that I've taken just to show you that all of these almost look like different individual people,
Right.
Because of their genetic difference, they all have their own personality. And actually, when you grow them organically and you leave them to it, well, if you decide not to prune them even, then you do actually realize that some of them want to grow wide, some of them want to grow tall, some of them, kind of develop long arms and big leaves, smaller leaves, many leaves, close together or a bit further apart. So
Yeah.
I think that's fascinating as a grower. And you're right. I'm very privileged to be able to it's all sometimes very hard. I mean, I don't normally invite or let anyone come to the farm when and it rains and I'm wet and I'm in my soil full of soil and I'm kind of and it's a great day and I kind of think, what am I doing? What am I doing here? It's all worthwhile. It's all worthwhile.
So how would you describe the taste of the teas that you grow in Scotland? Because it's interesting, like this little blend that I have here today is something that, in the general marketplace we might call like a Scottish breakfast, right? It's hearty and it's really strong and it goes well with the biscuits and everything. And
Yes.
but when you actually grow tea in Scotland, because it's so far north, it's really different. How would you describe your teas?
It's funny. I mean, I do love to talk, but in terms of that, I do prefer other people to describe it. But no,
Oh.
I try. I think there's definitely a sweetness to it, and I think so. The black tea has this kind of bit of sweet and a little bit of maltiness from the Scottish soil, I would say. There's lots of natural stone here. It's also a little bit of a dreamy landscape, and so I think it's got a little bit of that, and I don't think it's got the roughness that sometimes Scotland has as well.
Right.
And the green tea, I think the green tea is. I'm experimentation with the green tea. I've made some, which I love actually. Um, and that also has a sweetness, but not the maltiness in as part of it. But what I would say about the I mean, I'm not the only grower in Scotland or in the UK or in Europe, and people might be quite interested to hear about that. There are quite a few. They're not all very active on Instagram. I think I'm the only one possibly with an organic certification, but I don't want to claim that if that's not true. Um, and but what would be exciting is for people for a lover like yourself or a friend of yours in the States to to one day in 5 or 10 years time to enjoy a tea and say, well, that is typical, that has the notes of a typical Scottish
A
soil,
truly
single
Scottish soil.
estate.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and so there may
Yeah.
be there will be hope, variations in how we make tea, but there's maybe a signature there possibly developing eventually. I mean that is if we all can make, I guess, enough tea in quantity, because we have in Scotland quite a long dormancy period. Of course, you do have less growth, so the plants grow less fast compared to a country or a climate where you have quite a short dormancy.
Yeah. It reminds me what you describe a little bit. I know we have a mutual friend in Jun Chiyabari in Nepal, and I was really pleasantly surprised when I visited them some years ago to hear kind of a similar philosophy of how they would create the flavor that was signature for their own area. And it started with, bringing in seeds and plants from other countries to just see what would work in their area, what will work in their soil. And, of course, they have so many different elevation changes and environmental changes in the whole of their area that they manage. So you may have different plants in one area compared to another, but over a generation, as you say, like over like 10 years, and, you get that next generation that grows from seed and so on, you start to create the flavor that is truly like, that's your land. At first, it might taste a little bit like, oh, these kind of remind me of Taiwanese bushes or Japanese bushes. but in time it would taste more like their area. It would taste like Nepal.
Yes, definitely, definitely. Because you can have a kind of little bit of a signature that's coming through from a specific type genetically of Camellia sinensis, but of course what also matters is what you then do with it, what you do with the leaf once you harvested it. So and I find that so fascinating that, and sometimes you've got to stop yourself. If you're, as a tea grower and tea maker, are drawn to experimentation, then, you have to be careful not to just kind of keep experimenting, because I think for me, the ideal balance is that once I'm happy with some recipes that I've developed, that I very much keep to them. But it doesn't mean that I
Mm,
can't, if I have any leaf over, also keep experimenting, but also say,
yeah.
okay, these 2 or 3 I'm actually quite happy with, and
Mm,
I'm happy to share those with others. Um, but yes, but that's a very magical place up there in those mountains, and it was a wonderful visit, and I very much share their love of nature, and and I understand and know very much from Lotchan and Batchan that they and Morris as well. I don't know, did
mhm.
you meet Morris?
I
You must have
did,
met Morris
yeah.
then. Yeah, yeah, lovely Morris. And
Mhm,
he that they um also very much embrace natural farming,
mhm.
and it's in a way it's quite a complex concept, natural farming, but in a way it's very simple as well. But it's basically the idea that, so organic is, of course, that you avoid any chemicals, and also ideally any fertilizer, unless they're absolutely natural, possibly based on
Mhm,
other plants
mhm.
that you use as a fertilizer. Some people use seaweed, for example,
Yeah, yeah.
in biodynamics, or in organic. But natural farming goes actually a step further, and it says, I don't actually want any monocultures, because
Mm,
monocultures are not natural, and that you have the strongest plants. So if you have a core plant of tea, Camellia sinensis, they will be strongest and most healthy where you have within a lot of biodiversity. That is really the idea of it,
mhm.
and that your intervention over the years will actually be less and less, because nature will do it themselves. You only intervene if you have an invasive plant or things like
Mm,
that, but actually your intervention is less and less,
mhm.
um, because your belief with natural farming is that actually nature and a healthy, balanced ecosystem is is the strongest that can be. So for example, when I went to Korea over here, so I was told that sometimes the temperature drops in a similar way to what it drops here.
Hmm,
That if you have a
yeah.
monoculture of tea here, let's say you have a tea row and they're exposed, and you get the cold wind, and you get, like, let's say -7, -10, and comparatively, if you get that, oh, sorry, that's Cookie in the background, but if you get that in South Korea, and in the mountains, in the forests, within that within that biodiversity, you don't get the browning, for example, that
Right.
you would get with a monoculture, where
Mm,
tree bushes are exposed, especially when they're younger. It doesn't necessarily kill them unless they're
mhm,
very young, but when they're older, even, you can still get a browning at the top, and the leaves will
mhm.
fall off. I don't know if you've seen that
I
before. So
have
it's not
seen
really
that,
an
yeah.
illness, but yeah.
Right,
So,
yeah.
but if you have that as part of a forest, imagine,
Mm,
forest, trees, all kinds of different plants. you don't get that, because of course they kind of take care of each other, and you don't get so much wind, and you don't, and also it's a microsystem, isn't it? I don't know
Right.
if you know about microsystems, but
Mm-hmm.
you have different temperatures in microsystems as well. So these are, I personally am very excited about putting that into place, and I know it's quite experimental in a way, but I'm
Yeah.
very I'm very up for it. Yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me, did you know about do you have the concept where you live about when in gardening about the three sisters? The three plants that go
Um,
together very harmoniously?
tell me about, oh, sisters are
Three,
not always
three
harmony, are
sisters.
they?
Yeah, there's three sisters. So this is it was actually from it's reference. It's talked more about in the book that I was telling you about. Which, by the way, like
Oh
anybody else
yes,
who's interested in natural stuff, so Braiding
yes,
Sweetgrass is such a
yes.
beautiful book. This
I
is
will
by
get that, Suze.
Yes. So this is by a Native American woman who is also a botanist. So she mixes science with her own native understanding. And in the book, she talks about kind of you could call it like natural way of farming, but it's noticing which plants want to go together and how they help each other. So the three sisters in Native American culture are corn, beans, and squash. They all need each other. You would actually take all three seeds, plant them in the ground at the same time. The cord will come up first by several way, right? Inches, centimeters. And as
Yes.
slowly after that, the beans will come up, the little trellis will come up, and the corn will help it to be able to grow, and it'll hold it up. And then later the squash will grow on the ground. The pumpkins and the squash will help cover the ground and keep the moisture in. And really critically in that process, the beans, of course, fix the nitrogen in the soil so that all three of them can live together and have all the nutrients they need. And if you took out any of those three, they wouldn't work. They have to work together. And she writes that when Europeans came over, they thought that the native way in America of gardening was very strange because it wasn't rows, it wasn't monoculture, it was this kind of little mini ecosystems all over of plants that needed each other. And that was how they planted. And it was, as you say, like much more kind of like in a forest environment. The forest takes care of itself.
Yes. And that is beautiful how you described it, Suze. And I think we do have, whatever people think, I don't think it's actually a political concept, the concept of climate change, because in Europe very much we
It
do
shouldn't
see
be.
already. Yeah,
Yeah.
we see some effects. So we see, for example, that in Germany, they had a lot of struggle with and upset with their beautiful forests.
Yeah.
Three very, very dry summers with a lot of trees actually dying due to drought. Then they had in two-thirds in terms of land area in France, they had drought alerts with warnings about not using water. So you know it's quite close, and I think in Scotland everything's so green, and we do certainly have water, we have lots of rain, and people don't really think it's a, I don't think a lot of people think it's an issue, it's a problem. But I do think that I personally believe, as a tea grower, I would say as an experimental tea grower, I call myself more and more, but I would very much see that if we can have our tea a little bit more as part of of away from a monoculture and more in ecosystems, I believe, partly intuitively, but partly also based on more and more research evidence that is coming out, that those ecosystems, it is thought that they will survive more and will be more robust in the face of climate change, you know. And we do already know that tea farmers already talk about, there's a tea farmer in Sri Lanka who told me that his boreholes have to be deeper and deeper to reach water. And actually, a whole tea plantation can easily die with too much drought, because as we know, our tea plants love water. So water is essential, and water is also, critical, and it's becoming a problem in many parts of the world. So I think there are lots of issues there. So I personally think that in the face of climate change, we need to really think of our growing spaces and how can they be made most robust. And I believe with biodiversity and a fuller ecosystem, they can be more robust. And I that's how I feel very strongly, and that's why I do say that I'm now a natural farmer. I follow that, and I still have organic certification. That is the kind of basic level for me. But that's just the absence for me of chemicals and artificial fertilizer. That is just the minimum for me, really. But natural farming is something very exciting, I think. And now I've got a lady this winter, who's cataloguing all of our wildflowers, for example, which is very exciting. And we are already 300 plus. So we have and there, so I could talk about it all day, Sue. Sorry. I'm sure you have more questions.
Well, it's actually one that I thought of. If I'm not sure if maybe my understanding is correct or not, because I've heard it described to me by other natural farmers. But one just small example of something that people might consider in growing is that difference between seed versus cutting. Because if I understand correctly, the cuttings, the roots will grow out, versus a seed that sends down that taproot and it goes all the way down. So it's a stronger, healthier plant, but it's able to get to where the water and the nutrients are, because it's growing from seed. And so in an area that is, trying to be rebuilt and trying to be renourished, if somebody wants to plant tea, it seems like it would behoove them to try growing from seed first, rather than try growing from little cuttings, because it'll be better for the soil and be better for the plants. Is that correct by your understanding too?
Yes, indeed. I mean, the two reasons why we grow from seed in Scotland, I think the majority of people here in Scotland will grow from seed, because you do have a proper taproot when you grow from seed, and then lots of side roots. You have a bigger root system, less, you get a more shallow root system with a cutting, and but so that, of course, if you do have one or two quite strong frosts, cold winters, then you have more likelihood that you have some survivors with the seedling plants compared to the cuttings. But that's just for that reason. But yes, I fully agree with you. There's actually some really interesting research as well about mycorrhizae. I don't know if you are familiar with the term, with the fungi that very much live in symbiosis with perennials, with perennial plants. I don't know so much with annual plants, but perennial plants, so trees and many other bushes and plants. And there's lots of research now. There's a lady, she's called Suzette as well. I think Suzanne Simmons.
Oh, really?
And Suzanne, and she has done research on this for many years, I believe, and on communication, and communication between fungi and root systems, because it's actually, we believe we know so much about, as farmers, as growers, we believe we know quite a lot about plants, but actually we may know quite a bit about what happens above soil, but there is a whole world below soil with, actually, if you read up on it, many different microorganisms that
Yeah.
we actually haven't even identified yet. Lots of mites, lots of weevils, it's thousands
Mm-hmm.
of different nematodes and so many and they all are part of this connected world. And I love actually the idea that we shouldn't research anymore so much things in isolation, just the root system,
Yeah.
just the
Yeah.
plant in isolation, but actually look at what's happening, to the plant and it's so interesting this research over the last 2 years that actually we used to see root systems like from Darwin's time, even Charles Darwin's time. He would see just like actually I used to see in a very simplistic way. Maybe everyone still see. Lots of people still see that you've got the root system, they grow, and then they take up the nutrients. They
Mhm,
grow
mhm.
like arms, and
Right.
I take all the nutrients in. But it's not really like that. It's much more complex, and there is
Mm.
lots of communication and symbiotic relationships going on in the soil, that we partly know about now and has been established evidence, and many things we don't quite understand yet. But what we do understand is that lots of plants, including the tea plant, has symbiotic relationships with fungi, with
Mhm,
mycorrhizae, they
mhm,
call them. And so the mycorrhizae, the fungi, what's in it for them is really that they get the carbon from the perennial from the plant, and the
mhm,
plant is helped by the fungi to get the nutrients. So, but that takes years to establish a little bit. So with my
mm,
newbie plants, we have to allow nature to take its course, and that's also why I'm so against pesticides and fungicides and herbicides, because
mm,
I feel we're taking a risk. Because by definition, fungicides, if you spray them, you're worried about some kind of fungus. Like copper sprays often, you
mhm,
worry about fungus on top of your leaves. But of course, that will go into your soil, and what you destroy is actually what might be really, really helpful. Because mycorrhizae are fungi and they
Yeah,
will be disturbed.
isn't the process of fixing nitrogen in the soil also carried out by a fungi? Like, is it signals to be able to to take the nitrogen and to convert it, right? So if that wasn't there,
Yes,
yeah, you miss that
yes.
process.
That there are lots of there are actually lots of things that are happening there. But for example, you can plant a lot of clover, and some of the
Mhm,
clover will take nitrogen from the air,
mhm,
and then if you don't take the clover away, but you let it over the winter just degrade like leaves, and your
mm,
microorganisms will also nibble away on all of that plant material, turn it into soil, lovely dark soil that smells beautiful. um, then you've got that actually is nitrogen fixing as well for you. So
mm,
some
mhm, mhm,
plants
right.
some plants that you can actually plant and add, I would only say if they're native or if they're not non-invasive, because the last thing you want is introduce
Yeah.
something that's totally taking over then, but it's but if you can do that in natural farming as well, introduce more clover, because clover would be there, certainly here naturally. And interestingly enough, Suze, I saw when I was in beautiful Jun Chiyabari in the mountains there, a lot of plants that are maybe variations from the plants that I'm familiar with here. And that was actually quite
Oh,
emotional for me.
yeah. That's very sweet.
It's yeah,
You
very,
mean that
very
like it
beautiful.
serves the
So they
same
have beautiful.
purpose there as it does for you, and yeah.
Exactly, yes, and it just shows me that they are it was just wonderful to see so far apart, also
Mhm.
beautiful clovers, all also just naturally
Mhm.
similar. Not all the wildflowers were the same, but some of them were similar, which was very, very
Hmm.
interesting to me. But that's why I believe we're actually disturbing something potentially if we're spraying. And I know that's a controversial topic, but I can only say what I understand, from my experience with soil and being with my plants every day, that I wouldn't want to take that risk
Hmm.
um, of getting rid really, or potentially of things that might be quite useful for you, as biodiversity and your ecosystem establishes itself with the tea plants, and gets stronger and communicates with each other. And when I say that perennial plants communicate, the root systems communicate, it's not because I'm saying, I'm that's just in my head. There's lots of evidence for that.
Yeah, there's
That there's
increasing
these,
more evidence
you
on it
know,
that we can
yeah,
measure it. Yeah.
yes. So I think, and the sad thing about pesticides as well is that you can't really. I mean, I love to be kind of compromising, make just
Mm.
have a compromise about it. But if you really look at it, it is really an either or. You can't
Mm.
do a little bit of, a little bit of that, a little bit of that, because you either spray or you don't. So
Mm.
I think, yeah, for me it's quite a big topic. Yeah.
How do you? So I have two questions. The first, and they're similar, but the first one is on a grower level, because I know that you have you have other mentors and other partners that you collaborate with to share some of this information. For growers who are part of either a cooperative or they're part of a larger system, and so they have to grow really for scale.
Mhm.
How do you introduce this topic as something that they can get started? Because I know it could probably seem
Mhm.
really overwhelming. Like maybe they like they can believe in their heart the idea of we should move towards this, but on a practical level, if they started with everything the next day, I mean, they would probably end up killing off most of their garden. Like they have created such a very delicate balance where things need
Mhm.
certain inputs and they're not developed or strong enough to take away some of that. It's like if you have an injury to a joint, a physical therapist will say the worst thing you can
Mhm.
do is immobilize that joint. You have to keep it moving because if you put a cast on
Mhm.
it, unless something's broken, you don't need to do that. And it just trains the whole system around the joint and the muscles to atrophy and they can't work. So you have to very
Mhm. Mhm.
gradually mend that relationship. How do you have this conversation with people who are growing for scale?
Mm. I think that's a really good point, because I have, 24 acres, but Jun Chiyabari, for example, I would say, I don't know what Bachan and Lochan would say, but they probably are more medium scale. They have quite a few
Mm-hmm.
different spaces, and they're adding to that. So I would love to see, maybe a few examples, um, working together, different skills. So I would be a good example for a smaller scale
Mm-hmm.
tea garden, but also some larger skills, and actually do some more recording, because that's really for our benefit, but also for other people who would like to make some changes, because I do understand that to make a change is quite hard
Mm-hmm.
if you've used, you know, if you've used pesticides and herbicides, and if you use these sprays for many years, it's really hard to just say from one day to the next, okay, I'm finished with it. And
Yeah.
so there are quite a few years of where things can be quite hard as well. For example, I have a friend who has a farm, um, in another part of Scotland, and they're actually they have cows, and his dad actually sprayed heavily for many years, and he realized that the clover naturally only came back after, well, he counted 10 years. That's a long time.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah.
so I know that switching is really hard, but actually, but if you think about it in a different way, you can, if you plant tea, if you start from scratch, like I did, you've got, it's like an it it's an investment for roughly in 5-10 years time anyway. It's
That's
like
true.
doing an orchard, really.
Right.
They're not ready, the fruit won't be ready the year after. It's when you plant tea, when you start from scratch, you have to really see it as an investment for in 5 or 10 years time, and all your work is towards that, nourishing your plants, maybe adding seedlings each year,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and aiding and supporting space that you have. So
Yeah.
I mean, I think growing in, this is a kind of an exciting, maybe more newer thing. And I think there are probably quite a few examples across the world where tea growing happens in very natural environments, very natural, very
Mm-hmm.
undisturbed. There are lots of tea growers
Yeah.
who don't actually have their own, who know where plants are. So that's another example of natural farming in a way, because the tea plants are totally undisturbed in very rich ecosystems. So so yeah, I mean, I would like to, um, I would like actually for a few people to work together, and they have different skills, and and we could provide information. I would be very happy to provide and share information with others who would like to, make some changes, because I think it's so important. And sometimes you feel very isolated doing it, like I said before,
Yeah.
on a grey day, and the rain's chucking down on me, and I still have so much to do outside, and I think, what am I doing here?
Right.
So and it's nice to know that you do have connections and tea friends and other tea growers who you can chat with about your years, your experience, and that's lovely. Yeah, and that's what how your introduction started as well. It's about, this is interviews. For you, it's about connecting people, and that's really
Mm-hmm.
wonderful symbolically.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really important point to bring up to the connection, because it can get really isolating. And I've read accounts from some farmers, for example, in Japan, who also did the process of over years converting, and they also described something similar where if they tried to do it all at once, the garden would die. They can't do it. They have to go slow. And in that time, and I understand too that this is also, it gets into related topics like the socioeconomic status of different groups who may or may not be able to have that choice to do it,
Mm-hmm.
the financial stability of people who may not have the choice to do it, because not everyone could have their garden not produce for a year, right? Some of the farmers
Mm-hmm.
accounts I read, they took several years off. They didn't make tea for maybe 3 years. They were still working the garden, they were still harvesting and encouraging the growth, but it took a long time for the plants to
Mm-hmm.
adjust and for them to feel like they could ask anything of the plants to make tea, right? And
Mm-hmm.
in one case, he actually completely just redid everything, took everything out, and then grew from new seed all over once the land had rested. And so that's difficult. You couldn't ask that of everyone in every area, because
Yes.
unless their government supports that, they can't not
Yes.
grow anything. But just know that it is a process. It takes
Mm-hmm.
time,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't have to be quite so lonely. We can share and communicate more so that it doesn't feel that way.
Yes. Yes. I agree. I agree. But then I very sadly sometimes come across information where, people who work very hard on in some tea gardens, harvesting or spraying, have landed in hospital as well. There are
Yeah.
stats where every year people go to hospital because of, pesticides,
Yes.
the impact on their own bodies. And that is also sad. It's not something that we love talking about, because we all love to talk about a beautiful tea and the beautiful tea plants, but that is also part of reality.
Yeah.
And the other thing that is reality as well is that in my it's difficult. I totally agree with you. Not everyone can afford to do that, but on the other hand, I don't think it's sustainable, the heavy use of pesticides. It's not going to be
Yeah.
sustainable forever, because there are lots of farmers already saying that actually the soil isn't what it used to be. The structure is
Mm.
totally
Mhm.
lost as well. And oh gosh, what should we do about it? So I think it's not really sustainable. But what's very interesting as well is about totally removing all the plants that have received pesticides, and then replanting, and then planting new seedlings starting from scratch. One thing that was very interesting with regards to natural farming is that actually when you have heavily pruned plants, and
Mhm.
ha- and plants that have received a lot of pesticides from day one, from being a baby, they do behave differently. They
Mhm.
behave actually differently, and I wish there would
Yeah.
be a bit more research on that. But they do behave differently. So it is different to 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 suddenly treat a plant that is used to something different,
Mhm.
to a totally new situation. So it is
Yeah.
very and yeah, and also the spacing and everything would have to be
Mhm.
slightly, rethought of as well. What
Mhm.
shall I do with the spacing? And so yeah, but these are really interesting topics, I think, and I
Mhm.
hope I haven't bored that, or I will not bore whoever's watching the recording, the tea drinkers,
Oh, I
with
don't I
with
don't think
my
so at all.
rambling on, just
No,
talking
I don't think
talking
so at
about
all.
tea
This is
growing as well.
wonderful.
But I actually think tea growing should be of interest to tea drinkers as well, because it's just so linked, together. And often tea drinkers and tea lovers love to go and see where the tea grows and see the plants. So it is all
Yes.
connected, and all these people are connected. So
I think increasingly in the US, there are more people who are interested, especially as we have more of the small, like hobbyist farms popping up, and more people are
mhm,
interested, at least to go visit, at least to see how it's made and where it comes from. And
mhm,
and actually that your point about trying to get tea lovers interested in tea growing, at least on some
mhm,
small level, relates to my second question I wanted to ask you, that it relates to all of this, that um, a discussion with consumers, with the people who are tea lovers. So, teas, and I would by no means consider myself an expert, but increasingly over the years, I've had more and more really, really nice examples of teas from different countries that are naturally grown,
mhm, mhm,
and they differ quite a lot sometimes from the kind of more commercially available, especially the award-winning, super polished, beautiful teas. They do differ, but not in ways that I
mhm,
think are negative. It's just we have to have that conversation, so it might be
Mm-hmm.
a little less intense of a flavor
Mm-hmm.
because it's not manufactured to be a certain way. It's, it might be have a little bit of a softer appearance, but
Mm.
I think in terms of flavor, like it's really quite good. And I think it could stand against a more kind of recognized, we call them traditional teas because they're not traditional
Mm-hmm.
because they,
Mm-hmm.
we didn't always
Yes,
manufacture
yes.
tea this
No,
way.
I know
But
what you're saying.
yeah,
Yes,
like, so
yes.
how do we have discussion with people who are used to, I think it's kind of like in the same way here in the US, when before we started having organic produce be really widely available in the grocery store, when people would
Mm-hmm.
find an organic apple or an organic tomato and it's kind of small and it looks a little weird and they were like, no, I want this one, right? It took a long time to get people to understand, like, this doesn't have to be throwing out everything that you already have. It's just the acceptance of something that's a little bit different. How do we talk
Yes.
about that when it comes to natural teas? Because they are a bit different, but it's not in a negative way. They are special on their own. How do you talk about that?
Yes, yes. I think that's a really important point. So first of all, I think that someone came, a lovely tea lady came and said to me, Monica, what a shame that some organic teas are rubbish. And she said, and I said, gosh, why is that from your experience? And she said to me, because those farmers who don't know how to make proper tea just get an organic certification and sell it and think I can be lazy about the processing and I can just sell it anyway because it's organic. So
Because it's
first of
organic,
all,
yeah.
yeah, so I think that's a really important point that we should keep apart the processing and it's organic and natural. Totally agree with you. There's something there when something is has naturally grown, but the processing, whether someone can do that and master that and is good at it, is still different to actually whether you can grow it. So
That's
the
very true.
ideal thing is when the ideal thing is when both things come together, and that's when the beauty happens and the wonderful things happen. But it doesn't always happen. And also, what I would say about organic, I think organic farmers and also biodynamic farmers are wonderful, and they are most of them absolutely care about what they do deeply. But in tea growing, and maybe I'm saying something controversial, but I'm going to say anyway, in tea
Go for
growing,
it.
in tea growing, some people who do organic or biodynamic use certain things that comes through in the taste. And they think it's natural fertilizer. It is natural fertilizer. For example, seaweed, for
Mhm.
example, coffee granules, for
Mm.
example, that stuff. And these are strong tastes. And I
Hmm.
think for a really, really fine tea, when someone has a fine palate, they will say to you, I know that that person or that farm, biodynamic, organic, or whatever, has used seaweed. They think that they've done something wonderful. The plants maybe like it,
Mhm.
they soak up the nutrients, but it does come through in the taste. So that's where I make a clear distinction between
Mm.
growing and processing. And then
Mhm.
also your
Sure.
own palate and developing that. I think these are three very, very different things.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's such a good point, and perhaps we can all do more to share teas and highlight teas from people who are excellent processors, people who really know how to make it
Mm,
with skill. In kind of a similar way, I've had examples of teas from producers who both have some selection of what they do is more handmade, and some selection of what they do
mm,
uses the machinery. And I remember reading an account from one said producer who, by all means would be considered a tea master because he has done it since he was a child and learned it from his
mhm.
family, and he lives in China in an area that's very regarded for their tea. And he says, you can't use the machinery until you first master how to do it by hand. You first
Yes,
understand how that leaf
yes,
wants to behave, because if
yes.
you try to take that shortcut, you can't take that shortcut. and have it be the
Yes.
same quality. And it was really special to taste both of his teas.
Yes.
And to see that they're a little bit different, but they're both so good. And you could tell that was somebody who understood how to process tea properly, that both
Yes.
the handmade as well as the machine could be really great quality.
Yes. And that's why I'm so grateful to my first teacher. I don't know, he will probably would watch this, but Mr. Gao from Taiwan, who
Oh,
said
send
to
him the
me,
video. Let's send him the video.
I will. So he was the one who, when I came all sweaty because I wasn't used to the heat, with my straw hat and my silliness, he took pity on me. He said, "Gosh, this crazy lady from Scotland who wants to learn tea. Okay, I'll do it." He let me stay with his lovely, lovely family, which was very special. We only ate rice really, and washed our hands, and actually, in his case, all of his body with tea. That's what he
Wow.
did in the tea season and processing. And the only smell was tea related. And he said, put the notepad away, put the watch away, everything rubbish, 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 Monica. And I just want you to use all your senses. And I think that's what I would say, because I'm a newbie. I've only done this for a few years. And I would say to all newbies, do it that way.
I completely
Where there are
agree.
don't go where there's lots of machines. Of course, you will learn from that as well, and it'll be exciting, and there'll be lovely people there. But when you come back and you feel, okay, let's try a bit of processing myself, my own tea, you will feel lost because you're just seeing the machines, and
Yeah.
you haven't been challenged with your own senses. And that is touch, that is smell, that is sight. He was just so challenging, and I wouldn't be where I am now without him. So
Oh, so
he was very
sweet.
grumpy and a tough teacher as well.
Oh, I completely agree with that. Like it's very similar to, I think, how people learn how to taste tea. It's similar to how, I've been fortunate enough to study tea ceremony previously. And it's how you learn tea ceremony. Like, you don't take notes in the tea room. There's no notebooks. There's no taking pictures. You learn with your body. You learn with your senses. And to a certain extent, you don't even ask questions. Not that your teacher wouldn't answer or try to answer, but some things are kind of beyond words. So you just do it. And then it starts to sink in.
Yes.
And then the body starts to understand, oh, that's why. That's why I do that. And I think the same is probably very true for making tea. Like, when you involve
Yes.
your whole self with the leaf, then you can communicate in that way that the body understands. And it's beyond taking notes, it's beyond videoing it and trying to recreate a recipe at home.
Yes. Yes. I very much agree, Sue. So I always smile when people come and say, "Oh, Monica, what's your recipe?" And in a way, there isn't especially when you're
Yeah.
a newbie, don't think there is a recipe. There shouldn't be a recipe. That's not how you start and how you learn. But that's something that I don't know anything about, and I would love, as I have time in the future, to develop those skills, Suze. That sounds lovely. The tea ceremony. So that sounds really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, we could do a workshop in at your
Yeah.
place. So
Yeah.
actually, as we kind of wrap up here, that's something I wanted to let viewers know about. So people can come visit you, yes? How does that work?
Yes. Yes. Well, normally during the growing season, um, it's normally May to the beginning of September.
Okay.
People can, contact us, and normally um, it depends on everyone's need and interest, really, because sometimes they get bigger groups. So maybe there could be some people who work in a kind of maybe tea shop or so, and it's like a little team, and they want to see, some tea some tea growing, and they don't necessarily have time to go far away, possibly to
Sure.
a long trip. So I have visitors from the UK. I have and also visitors from Europe as well, the continent, and I've had a lovely lady from America as well coming, and in Italy, and yeah, from different places, and it's lovely. So there are half days. There's full days. There's more intense kind of learning about tea growing. There's actually
Hmm.
people coming because they're interested in the possibility of using a piece of land that they may have, that they have
Mm.
for
Hmm.
their own project. So I do
Yeah.
that as well, and that I normally spend a day where they are, just we look at their soil, and we look at the situation where they are, and then they also spend a day with me here, and sometimes, Suze, they realize that the work is actually is there's so much, and the
Mm.
investment is in a few years, in a few
Yeah.
years' time in the future, and they actually move away from it. They think it's a wonderful idea,
Mm.
but it is very
Yeah.
different to growing an annual and having a harvest in the same year. It's very
Yeah.
different. Um, but so it varies. Some people come and just want to see the plants and want to
Hmm.
chat, and want to we drink some tea together. It's a variety of teas. Some people have know a lot about tea, and then I also have people coming who only ever drank tea bag tea, and that's a big eye
Mm.
opener to them to
Hmm.
try their first oolong, or
Yeah.
that. So it's many different. So it's best normally just to contact me beforehand, just because I normally ask, oh,
Mm.
but what are you interested in, more in the growing side or in the
Sure.
drinking side, or it just depends. But people are
Yeah.
very welcome. Yeah.
I think that's also something quite special for people who, maybe you're interested in doing a little tea travel, and if you've only ever been to places that the processing and the farm is like, it's kind of large, and it's really, there's a lot of technology that's been put in there, and that can also be really awesome, really exciting, but it's something to take that and translate that to a small scale, and that's really quite special, and you see things that you would
Yes.
not have thought of before, and so I think anybody who works in tea and really cares about tea, wants to learn more, you should see small scale too. You really should experience that.
Yes. Oh, definitely, definitely. And also, we're in a unique situation of being off grid. So all of the tea making, all of the tea processing, I have lots of solar panels that
Mm.
actually power any ovens that I use, or any technical any equipment that I use. So that's sometimes quite interesting for people as
Yeah.
well, and the kind of energy generation side. But I do realize it looks like I'm in the
I
night
know.
here,
It's
whereas
true.
it
It's very
shows you
true.
that in Scotland, though, that it gets that. See, in the like in the winter time, we
Mhm.
have such a short day, but also in the summertime in June, it still looks like it's light at 10 o'clock at night. So
Same here. I
so
think we're
yeah.
probably at a very similar latitude from Chicago to where you are in Perthshire. Like, we also will get dark at 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Chicago, and
Oh, gee. Yes,
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 yes.
yes,
Well,
yeah.
just one last question. So, if people want to buy your tea, if they would like to try some of your teas, can they order online from you, or how might they be able to find your tea?
So the last couple of years, the quantities have been small because the plants are still small,
Hmm.
but and I don't want to over harvest either. So the
Sure.
last couple of years, it's just really, if I had a waiting list, gosh, which is actually quite nice to have, isn't
Oh,
that quite
yeah.
sweet? Um, but now this year, um, so the tea that I still have is all allocated now for these lovely visits that I'm going to do with
Mhm.
Hannah. because she came in the summertime and she spent some time here as an art residency, and she makes, bronze tea,
Oh yeah,
bronze
yeah.
leaves.
Please
No,
talk about
well,
the tour that you're doing.
yeah,
Yeah.
she's a bronze artist, and it was the first time that she experienced tea leaves, Camellia sinensis. But
Oh.
she works in forests and chooses beautiful leaves to turn them into bronze, little bronze sculptures. So so she has taken some with her, and they've all turned into beautiful bronze tea leaves. And we're doing a little tour. So we're doing London, postcard teas first, in a couple of days, I think. I'm on the night train tomorrow.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and then and then in Edinburgh with the lovely Erica with Etiquette. I don't know if you know Erica, but she's lovely. Most people in the tea world are just lovely. That's why I
Mhm.
use the word all the time. They are.
Yeah. It's
And
such a tea word. Lovely.
yeah.
I say it a lot too.
And And then in January, what was it in January? Are we going to Madrid first? Yes. And
Oh
then we're
wow.
finishing off in March in Vienna, which I
Hmm.
love the idea of going to Vienna.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and that's where I've kept this some of my tea back for some tasting as
Ah,
well,
okay.
which
Sure.
will be very nice. So it's nicely connected. So there's the bronze tea leaves, and there's
Hmm.
also the tea
It's tasting.
that has come from those plants, really. So, but basically, if people want to order, it's now not before the beginning of the next growing season, which
Okay.
starting in May time. So
Yeah.
um so yeah, I'm sorry.
But that's, you know what? I think that that's also something to embrace about tea too, is the seasonality of it. And
Yes,
enjoy something while it's here and then look forward to it for next
yes,
time. It always comes back
yes,
around. Tea doesn't forget you. It comes back.
yes, yes, yes. And when you experience it not all year round, but have a specialty just when it's available, it's
Yeah,
also quite special, isn't it?
very
Yeah,
much so. Very much so.
yeah, yeah.
Well, thank
But
you so much. Oh, go
oh,
ahead.
thank you so much. I feel a hug coming on, but you're too far
Oh,
away.
yes. Yes.
You're too far away. But when I meet you face
Yes.
to face, then we can hug.
Then we can hug. Thank you so much. This was really so delightful to have you on. And if you like, I'd love to have you come back. Maybe during the growing season, and we could do another chat.
Oh,
That could be really lovely to share that.
yes. Lovely. Well, maybe we could do one. I don't know if I could get the internet going outside. That would be nice to do a little show you actually
Possibly that
outside a
could
little
be
bit
really
while we're
amazing.
on. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yes.
know the
Yes.
my friends in Georgia were able to do that when we did our check for making sure that we could broadcast. They were actually able to go out into the garden and
Oh.
get a signal, which was really, yeah. So
Oh.
we're going to do that next year during their they're going to come back during growing season 2
Oh,
as well.
nice.
But also we can do something where it's a little kind of tricky, but not super much. But we could do something where you can show photos on your end. So even
Oh,
if you
yes.
couldn't take the camera outside, you could still take some photos in
Could show
advance, and you
them
could
too.
show
Yes.
them. Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
we could do
Yes.
that.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
but I would
That
love to have
sounds
you back on.
lovely.
So,
That sounds lovely. That sounds lovely. And if there's any events ever, we might come across. I know we live quite far away from each other, but who knows? Are
Mhm.
you ever in Europe, Suze?
I haven't been in about like 3 years, but I would
Mm.
definitely love to visit again and to come see your area, maybe see some of the other small tea producers, because we could do like a little
Yes.
co-event. We could do some tea workshop together. That'd be amazing.
Yes. Oh, that would be wonderful. That would
And
be really wonderful.
I know there are some tea growers here in the U.S. who would love a conversation with you and a workshop with you. So we
Oh,
can
that
reach out.
sounds,
We can reach out
yes.
and talk about that. But I think, yeah, I know there's some folks here who would really love to learn from you and to hear what you have to say too.
Oh, oh, thank you so much, Susan. Just write to me or so. But yeah, thank
Yes.
you so much.
Will
And I
do.
hope whoever, if anyone is watching the recording, I hope you enjoy it, and it's lovely to be part of this. Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. So we'll chat soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So again, thank you everyone for watching. If you have any questions that you'd like to share with Monica, you can always email me at hello@beingtea.com, and I'm happy to pass those along to her. Follow her farm on Instagram. Please follow her on Instagram, because you will be amazed by all the wildlife and the insects and the plants that you'll meet. She is at Windy Hollow Farm is the name of her farm. It's just beautiful. It's just amazing. And again, if you are interested to learn more about tea, so some of the classes I teach are both tea skills as well as tea meditation, new classes every single month for members. And again, that is at patreon.com/beingtea. I would love to have you as a member and have you be part of this wonderful community. So I will see you again next month for our next guest interview. Until then, take care.